Good afternoon. My name is AB Sam Thomas, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Middle East. I'm here today to welcome you all to this webinar, which we are staging in association with the Dubai Chamber of Digital Economy as part of its App Olympics competition. For those of you who might not be familiar with the App Olympics, this is a new contest that was launched as part of the Create Apps in Dubai initiative, which was announced by His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Crown Prince of Dubai and Chairman of the Executive Council of Dubai in March earlier this year. Open to UAE nationals and residents of all ages from any emirate, as well as global tech startup interested in establishing a presence in Dubai. The App Olympics competition enables participants to learn about app development, build mobile applications, and compete for major prizes and awards that will accelerate business growth. In case you haven't already applied to be a part of the App Olympics, just know that you have until the 20th of December to submit your applications on createapps.ae. That's createapps.ae. So basically, the App Olympics is an initiative that aims to give participants a structured learning journey in the world of app development. And today's webinar is really a design thinking workshop aimed at helping all of you make use of these principles in building what could potentially be the next blockbuster app. Leading today's design thinking workshop is YJ Soon, the co-founder of Tinker Academy, who has helped thousands of students bring to life their mobile app ideas in Dubai and Singapore. YJ is an Apple App Development with Swift certified trainer, as well as an Apple professional learning specialist. This particular session that you've just joined will last about 1.5 hours, and it will offer an in-depth analysis on how to inculcate real-world problem solving into mobile app development strategies. YJ, the stage is yours, and yeah, wishing everyone a great learning experience.
Thank you, Abby. Let me just check to make sure that everything's all set up, and I think we're good to go. Hello, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is YJ. I'm all the way here a few time zones away, assuming you're in the UAE. I'm all the way in Singapore, and it's early evening for me. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to all of you. I really appreciate the chance to do this. And today, I'd just like to take a little bit of time to share a little bit about design thinking and how it relates to app development. So, as Abby mentioned, I've been spending quite a bit of time working with students on app development over the years. I have some experience launching and creating my own apps as well. And I'll be sharing some of that. And there'll be a few case studies from my own experience that hopefully you can draw some learning from. And the entire idea of this is I just want this to be useful for you. So if you have a chance, please just take the time to ask questions in the webinar chat box. It's not quite the same as your usual Zoom chat box, but it's a webinar, so you can ask questions. And whenever I have a chance, I'll go take a look at the questions over there. I will likely just pause in between sections and address any questions. So just sit back and we will get started right now. So my first, I guess my first part of all this is, what is design thinking? And I'm sure all of you have heard of design thinking somewhere along the way. You might have heard of the 5 stages, and they're somewhere on the screen. There's empathize, there's define, there's ideate, there's prototype, and there's test. Okay, so this is one of those things where it's all very conceptual. And you are, by taking part in this competition, you are in a situation where you have to put this into practice. So I'm hoping to share some of these things that can help you put these into practice. And I have 3 sections to my presentation. The first part over here is some case studies, some apps that I've made together with my colleagues. So I started a company many years ago. I'll tell you about my story in a bit. Okay. And we learned a lot of lessons along the way about finding product market fit and who our audience is and what do we actually want. And that ties in really well to the empathize and define segments of the design thinking process. Next, what should you make? Okay. So I think many of you might already be here with some ideas, but maybe some of you are open to other ideas. You might be thinking, well, I'm not quite sure what I want to make. I'm going to show you some of the apps that my students have made over the years. I'm going to show you some apps that have won awards over the years. These are not the same group of apps, but I think it's just a way to get you thinking, right? Just to help you figure out what you should be making and why it matters to you. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about design and prototyping. It's a very high level concept. We're not actually going into any actual design. We're not actually going to do any visual design. We're not going to do any linking between prototype screens or things like that. The aim here is really for you to understand why you need to prototype and maybe the different types of prototyping processes that are available. So let me just run a quick poll over here, right? So there's 5 stages: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So I'd just like to get a quick show of hands, like which part of the design thinking process do you think you understand the best? Okay, so just let me know. There's a poll in the Zoom webinar. So just let me know which ones of these you're most comfortable with. This will give me a chance to just, target my talk a little bit better, so I can spend a bit more time on the things that, people are less comfortable with, perhaps. Okay, so while that poll is ongoing, I'm going to get started with the actual slides. Okay, so just by way of background, so my name is YJ, right? Abhi's introduced me. So I do a bit of work with app development, especially in the Apple ecosystem. So I actually do a lot of work with Swift and iOS app development. I work a lot with younger audiences, and sometimes I do work with like tertiary students and adults as well who are interested in building their apps. Before I started doing all this, though, my friends and I started a company in 2011. It's been many years. I can never remember exactly when. And we started off at the boom of the app development cycle. So 2011, for those of us who remember, that was when everyone wanted an app. You could go out there and say, I'm building apps, and people would just come to you and say, okay, build me this, right? I'll pay you to build this for me. So we were there during that time. We started a company, and we thought that, we were pretty good at building apps for other people. And we thought maybe we could build some apps for ourselves. Okay, so and there's a huge difference between these two. All right. One is you are taking something that other people want built. They spec it out. They say, okay, I want this screen right here. This is our company's goals. This is what we want to do with our app. And the other is you trying to figure out what do people actually want, right? Why am I building this? Why don't people want this feature? And many, many difficult questions. So we did both. Of course, the first method, which is where we built app for other people, that sustained the business over the years. And the second one, well, let me tell you a bit more. So the first app I'd like to tell you about is something called Teacher's Pet. And this is a bit more history about myself. I actually used to be a full-time high school teacher here in Singapore. And as a beginning teacher, one of the things that I ran into was that when I went into a classroom, I realized that there were just so many things I had to figure out. So I'm not sure how many of you remember your time in school, but when you go into a classroom, the students will come up to you and they'll say, oh, teacher, I kind of forgot to bring this thing today. Can I give it to you next week? So you had to make a mental note of that. And as you're collecting all your homework from the students, like 3 of them aren't here today. 2 of them said they lost it and they'll give it to you after recess break. And all kinds of different things that really require someone to have 3 brains in order to do their job effectively. So this was around 2011, 2012. And mobile devices were starting to gain massive popularity. Everyone was building apps, everyone was getting mobile devices. So we thought, well, you know what? Let's offload some of this into a mobile device. Right? So when the teacher goes into the classroom, you could have an app, and this app would know which classroom they're in, because here in Singapore, when teachers might teach about 5 different classes in a day, and each class has a different list of students, but it's always the same schedule. They always know exactly which classroom they're going to at which time. So the app should be able to know that. It should pop up that list of students. So if a student says, well, teacher, I'm gonna hand you my work maybe tomorrow. So the teacher could just, okay, tap on the student, tap on what they did, and the next day when the teacher comes into the classroom, they could be like, oh, hey, you promised me that you would give me your homework today. Did you actually do it? Okay, so the most effective teachers don't need this. right? I'm sure you've had really great teachers who could just remember all this, and the next day they would just totally go in and they know exactly what to do. But for beginning teachers like me, back when I first started teaching, this would have been, just super amazing to have. So the process of making this is what we did. We started off with a bit of prototyping, and I'll talk more about prototyping later in this session. And prototyping is really just about creating a version of your app that is ready for discussion, something that you don't mind changing. Okay, so you can see over here, this is our initial version where we said, okay, well, we're just going to have, some remaining items over here. And if you tap in all this, you'll push in a screen, and this thing allows the deletion and reordering. So there's all these kinds of things that we just needed to get on a page and discuss. And none of this is written in code, right? We made all this using design software. There's all kinds of design software out there that can make very convincing user interfaces. And this is just one example of what you can do with that. Okay. So let me just head on. So again, there's a lot of this, a lot of work that went into just planning and figuring out what goes into all this. So I put into these slides all the behind the scenes work that went into building these apps. And these are all the different things that we tried to figure out back in the day. We're like, well, you know what? If I tap on this, where does it go? If I do this, well, should we have the student labels below? Should we have the student labels in this color? All kinds of things that we had to figure out before we could actually start building the app. Because we certainly didn't want to end up in a situation where you build an app and then you realize, oh, wait, that's not how it should work. Okay, so yeah, this is our that was our planning process. So we built the app. We took about, I think, maybe 3 to 4 months, and we released it on the App Store. Okay, and this is a graph of the sales of our app. So we thought, something like this is going to be a great help for teachers. Let's sell it for, I don't know, like $4.99, right? So $4.99 seems like a reasonable amount to pay for something that would help you do your job better. And as you can see, these are all the sales that we ever made over the lifetime of the app. So we released it in April 2013, and by February 2015, we had given up. And we had sold a grand total of, how many apps do we have here? I don't have the total number on the screen, but we made 458 Singapore dollars, and I think that's about 1,000 dirhams, if I remember right. So that's not a lot. Okay, that's not a lot. I'm pretty sure all of us know that this is not enough to pay anybody in a company in many developed countries. Not even one person's salary. So what went wrong, right? What went wrong? So that's what I like to, spend a bit of time talking about today. So I have, I'm going to pull up the next poll on screen, right? So I'm just going to ask for you to give me some ideas about what could have gone wrong. I mean, we've done our postmortem. We thought about this over the years. We tried to figure out what went wrong, but I would just love to hear from you, right? I'm trying to keep this a little bit interactive. I'd just like to see whether you have any ideas what could have gone wrong. I described the app. We thought that there was a need for the app, but we put it out there. We spent a lot of time building it. You could see all our prototypes and everything, and nope, it fell flat. Okay, so I'd love to find out more about what you think went wrong. Like, let me see if I can actually see the answers for this. I can't actually see the answers until I end the poll. So I'm gonna ask everyone, just take a moment, maybe take the next 1 minute, see if you can spend a little bit of time just filling in something in the chat. If you just joined us, not to worry, I'll give you a bit more context. What this was an app where we were creating something for teachers. Okay, so the aim was to create something for teachers, and we wanted to help teachers do their jobs more effectively. Right? This was like the actual website that we published. And this was the app icon that I made. I was really proud of this one. It's like a little checkbox because it's kind of like a to-do list. And, a teacher's pet gives you an apple and everything, right? So I was really happy with this icon back in the day. But yeah, that's just something that we were doing. Okay. So I'm going to end the poll right now so I can actually see your responses. Thank you to the 8 of you who submitted answers. Let me see if I can just share the results. Give me a second. Let me go pull up my Zoom because I don't know where Zoom is. Okay, so some of you typed it into the questions box, so thank you so much. Appreciate that. So there's one here that says I would have done further research to make sure that there's strong demand. That's a very, very good point. I did not actually do that. Okay, so that's something that I think I should have done more of. We thought that we knew what teachers wanted, but we didn't. Okay, we spoke to a few of our friends, and friends are very supportive. Friends will tell you, "Oh, that's an awesome idea, right? Go for it, right? That sounds amazing." And also, this was really early days. This was back in the day where people didn't quite have a sense of when apps would be used and whether it would be appropriate for a teacher to take out their phone in the middle of a class and like key things into their phone. I think that would have given us some pause. All right, so thank you very much. All right, so I'm just gonna go see whether I can find my polls. I don't actually know where my results are, so I'm just trying to see where they are. Give me a second. Okay, so for some reason, all right. Okay, so no worries. Okay. All right. So I've pulled up the chat box. Okay, I think the poll might not be the best way to get your input. So if you want, you can just use the webinar chat, right? I think that works as well. Okay. And all right, I have some questions in here. Someone asked, how long did it take to develop the app? Right. This app took us about 3 months to develop, and there were 3 of us. Okay, so it's me and 2 co-founders. Another of my co-founders was actually a teacher. So we thought between the 2 of us, we would know exactly what our audience wanted. We were wrong. We didn't quite figure out exactly why it didn't work, but I think one of the problems was that it's very difficult to change people's habits. Teachers are used to writing things down. Teachers are used to remembering things. Teachers are not used to taking out their phone in the middle of a class to write things, to note down certain things in the classroom. So we thought maybe that was why our app wasn't so effective. Okay, so yeah, that's one of the apps that I'm sharing. Let me move on to the next one. Okay, and please feel free to use the webinar chat, and I'll be happy to. I have it on my other screen, so I can always keep track of that. Okay. So next, I have a very simple app. Okay, this app over here is something we call iCphoto, and this was actually our very first app. This was when my co-founders and I first started to program mobile apps, and it holds a special place in our heart because when we first started out, we were like, well, this app development thing, this is really interesting. So we took up one of the courses. There was a course by Stanford University, and it was one of the major courses available that taught you how to do iOS app development. It was a pretty well taught course, but we sat through the entire thing. We watched the videos, we tried to do the homework, and we couldn't quite figure out what to do after that. Okay, it just never sunk in. What really worked was when we found a problem and we decided to solve it. Okay, so this app is very simple. Here in Singapore, we have digital submissions for our identity cards. So IC stands for identity card. Okay, so we have a national identity card, and if you want to submit a new photo, you just take a digital photo. All right. However, the only issue with that is that the government portal that takes it accepts photos only in a certain size, 400 by 514 pixels. And you might imagine that it's actually not very easy for many users to crop their photos just to that size. So us being the techies in the family, we would be the ones helping our grandparents, our uncles, our friends. We'd be like, okay, give me your photo. I will crop it down for you. And the other thing is you have to make sure that your face is in the right place. Nowadays, there's a lot of technology that you can just lift your face out of a picture and you can submit it super easy. But back in the day, it was a lot harder. So we made an app. It's an app to help you take selfies, and your selfies will be resized to exactly the right size. All you have to do is you have to align your eyes to where the eye icon is and the mouth to where the mouth is, and you take a photo. Okay. And it was a huge hit. It was something that, like folks just really could get behind. And we made it to number 2 on the Singapore App Store. We were really happy. We made a version for the US because in the US, they have an interesting system where you cannot submit digital photos. You have to print it out. So we actually found a partner in the US where they would print it out, they mail it to them. They would charge us about, I think, $3 US, and we would charge users about $5. And for a long time, this worked really well until he stopped responding to messages. So I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, so this is essentially, our little success story. It worked really well, and it's something that we're really proud of. It's still on the App Store. We haven't updated it in about 5 or 6 years, but it's something that's still there. And sometimes when I walk around Singapore in a shopping mall, if I see someone just like telling their kid to stand with right in front of a white background, and they're holding their phone a certain way, I kind of know that they're actually using our app, and that's really cool. It's just a very nice feeling. These are some of the assets that we created for it, and these are some of the plans that we had, right? Just to go ahead and improve the app a little bit, maybe figure out what else we can do with it. And these are the icon designs that we had. It's all a little bit retro because this is all the way back from iOS 6. We're currently at iOS 15. So this was about 9 years ago. So the last time that we updated the app was many, many years ago. And this is the US version of the app. So yeah, so I mean, in terms of downloads, this was a nice little success for us. And this is only from a certain time. It's not even until present day. And we've had about, for the US version, we had about 200,000 downloads. For the Singapore version, we had about 180,000 downloads, which is not bad considering our population here is only about 5 to 6 million people. This is not a huge business success for us because it's a free app, right? It's a free app, and we made it available for anyone who wanted to use it. And we just put in some ads just because we thought, well, you know what? Maybe people won't mind just like sitting through an ad for a free service because they would normally have to pay, I would say, about 10 to 20 dirhams if they had to, sit in a booth and get it printed out and things like that. So yeah, people were okay with it. We made some, ad money, and it's just a nice little story all around. So that's one of the apps that we created. And the great thing about this is that I think we found a niche. We found a need. It was a need that we had because we were trying to solve a problem that we actually faced. And it was something that apparently other people face as well. It's not a great business idea. We've seen other apps come and go. They've tried to charge money for these things, and it just never quite worked out. So this is just something to think about, right? It's just one of those apps that, it holds a special place in our hearts because it's our very first app. One day we will find the time to actually update it, but that's what we have right now. Okay, so that's our second case study, right? I have 3 for you. The third one is probably the biggest business that we've created out of app development, and I'd like to share a bit more with you. It's called Guest Day, and Guest Day is our iPad-based guest registration service. We started the very first version in 2009 as a fun side project for a friend's wedding. And those of you who are keeping count, you probably know that in 2009, the iPad wasn't even out yet. It evolved to serve an almost entirely different set of customers, and it made for a great side business. I would say it made like easily 6 digits in Singapore dollars. So I think 1 Singapore dollar is about 2.5 dirhams, if I remember my exchange rate right. So it was a decent side business until the pandemic, because no more events, no more weddings. So let me tell you a bit more about this little product that we made. So the very first version was a very rough idea, and I think we lucked out. We thought it was just enough to get feedback, and it helped us find product market fit. Okay, so let's take a look. So what happened was that in 2009, I don't know about you guys, but for us, so for me, I was in my 20s, and so were my co-founders. And in my 20s, I spent a lot of time going for my friends' weddings. Okay, so every week it seemed a friend would get married and we would go and attend the wedding. And here in Singapore, we have this thing where we actually pack money into a little envelope and we give it to them. So it's really expensive time, but we were of course very happy for our friends. One of our friends actually asked, he asked the 3 of us who eventually found this company. He asked, hey, you guys do a lot of tech stuff. Could you help me with my reception table? And we were like, sure, we'll build an app. It wasn't actually an app, but it was a website. We brought in a lot of laptops and routers and things like that. And it worked well. This is an exaggeration. He did not hate us all. But the great thing was that we actually got it working. And the idea was that, in weddings here, especially weddings among Singaporean Chinese people, it's usually a big affair. So I think maybe like 50 tables or so of 10. And what people would do is that they go up to the wedding reception table and they would say, okay, my name is this. Could you let me know where I'm seated? And what would happen was people would like browse through paper lists. Maybe now they would use like, spreadsheets or things like that. So what we did was we built an app. So all you need to do is you need to search. And after you search, it'll tell you where you're seated. It'll even tell you who you're seated with in case you've realized that there are people at that table that you want to avoid and you want to leave. We of course didn't encourage this, but it's a possibility. So yeah, I think we realized that this was meeting a need, and it was something that people were using. So we did it for all our friends. This was something that we just volunteered for our friends' weddings, and we said, hey, you know what? You want to use this? Go ahead. Let's try it out, see whether it works. And people were delighted by the experience. People really enjoyed it. They thought it was really easy to use, and they thought that there was a big future ahead of it. Afterwards, we tried to productize it. So we tried to make it into something that we could sell. All right, so you can see over here, this is our very first attempt at a web page. It's very simple. And what happened was that we realized that it was a lot of effort because we had to bring all our computers down. We had to be there before the wedding reception started. Wedding couples are very jittery. They don't want anything to go wrong on their big days, obviously. And it was just a really difficult experience, and it's just something that we couldn't get paid enough to run as a business. Okay, so this was another experience. This was when someone from Malaysia is a neighboring country, like a wedding planner, actually flew us up to Malaysia to actually run this for his wedding, so he could see what it looked like, and maybe we could work together some more. And these were some of the back end tools that we created. This is a video. It's just very low resolution, so please pardon the video. And we got featured. We got some press right from a local startup news and things like that. And at some point, it was our turn. Right, so it was my turn to get married sometime around 2010, and we thought, hey, you know what? There's another product that we can build. Let's help wedding couples plan their guest lists. Because the guest day product was expensive. We had to charge a few $100s. And that meant that, we thought there was room for a cheaper service that people could just sign up for, and they could use it, and we could upsell them to the more expensive service. So these were some of our sketches. We actually found all of these and scanned them, right? I'm kind of happy that they're around. So once again, it's just to emphasize the need for prototyping, just to be able to figure out, what goes where, which features to keep, what to do on the page, and things like that. All right, so you can see over here how you can plan an event on the website. Okay, so this was a web-based app, and you can see all the different features that we built into the app. Okay, so as I go through this, the prototypes will get more and more detailed until we reach the point where this is the actual final thing that we built. All right, and yeah, it worked. I tried to use it for my wedding, right? But I found it really clunky. And unfortunately, finally, when it came time to productize it, the number of users that we had was 0. We didn't actually manage to sell anyone on this. The main guest day product, the expensive one, was actually doing fine. We would get some demand for it. We'd go down, we'd set up. But this cheaper version, getting people to use a different way of planning their guest lists just didn't work. So at this point, I want to just get some feedback. Why do you think that's the case? Let me know so let's use the webinar chat for this instead. Why do you think that's the case? Why is it that we couldn't get a single user for the cheaper product? We were doing fine with the expensive product, right? The one where we went down, we set up everything for them, helped them register the guests, and we charged them a few $100s. This one, we said, just pay us $5 a month or something, right? We were happy with maybe $5 once off or things like that. But nobody wanted to use it. Any ideas? I'm just curious to think to see what you all might think about this. Yeah, one time. Okay, so we have something that says someone that says only one time, right? It's a one-time thing. And when I think one of the issues that we faced was that it's very difficult to get customers at the right time of their process. What do I mean by that? Well, we talked to some friends, right? We talked to some friends, and then what happened was that they were like, well, I would love to use your product, but I already have this really detailed spreadsheet, and I'm not going to migrate my entire spreadsheet over to your product, even if it makes life easier, because it would take me a day to get everything there, and then I would have to get used to using your product. So they were really nice about it, but they said, no, we're not going to be able to use them, right? So yeah, and that's right. Some people think that products that are cheap are not actually worth using. Okay, so it's counterintuitive. Sometimes the more expensive your product, the more convinced some people are that they need to use it. So there's, I'm sure, especially when you're selling to businesses, the more expensive products might actually command a bit more respect than something that's just like $1 a month. Not sure if any of you talk to, IT procurement people, but there is this tendency to think that, a bit more expensive, there's probably something there. Let's go for that one. Okay. So yeah, all kinds of reasons, but yeah, this was one of our grand failures. So what we did was we moved on, right? We moved on. And the great thing was that around 2013, 2014, which was when the iPad started showing up in Singapore, and we could get it. And we thought this was a great product because the iPad would allow us to have the devices, bring them down really easily. In fact, we could even just pass the devices to the wedding couple and they would run it on their own. So these were some of the preliminary designs that we did. So I just want to spend a little bit of time just to share all the processes that we made to get to the final product. Okay, it's still the same product. It's no longer a website, but it's an iPad app. Okay, so you can just take a look and see. This is the product that we had at the time. All right, so, and this was some of the designs that we had. I just thought it'd be fun to share all these, okay, all the different app designs. It is on the App Store. It is actually on the App Store, and it's something that we do keep around for clients nowadays. And these are some of the marketing that we had to put in, right? So it wasn't available for someone to just put a credit card and buy us an in-app purchase. They had to send us an email and we had to do the whole customer acquisition process. It wasn't completely, the sign-up process wasn't completely friction-free, but it's something that we had to learn and go through. Now, one last thing, which is this product. We realized something about our Guest Day product. Right, I'm not sure how many of you have figured out where Guest Day has gone since the very beginning. So initially, our customers for Guest Day were wedding couples. What's wrong with weddings as a target audience? Can anyone tell me? Okay, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's wrong with wedding couples as a target audience? All right, feel free to type your answer into the chat, okay? And I'll reveal it in about 10 seconds time. The problem with wedding couples as a customer base, yes, not a big enough market. Actually, well, I would say that, in the chat we have it's not a big enough market. Wedding couples are a pretty big market, I think, because people get married all the time. So wedding planners are doing fine, but wedding planners charge a lot, right? They spend a lot of time and it's a real concierge service. One of the problems with wedding couples is that they're not repeat customers. Okay, so just think about that for a moment. Wedding couples are generally not repeat customers. If they come back to us, well, we feel a little bit sad because they need to hold another wedding, I guess. Somewhere along the way, though, there were other people who came to us and said, well, you know what? We could use this. We could use this for our events. Okay. And event planners are repeat customers. So they would hold events, they would hold a conference, and they would say, well, you know what? We want our guests at the conference to have a fantastic check-in experience. They would go up to the counter, they would just scan a QR code, we had QR code scanning, or they would just say their name and they would be checked in really quickly. Okay. And yeah, so that's how we pivoted our business into events. And the great thing about this was that we worked with event planners. Event planners would come to us, they would pay us a certain sum, right? We would charge them a certain amount. And the event planners would just take this amount and just bill it to the client. And they would look good. The client would be happy because guest registration is much faster, and we would be happy because we had customers. And this is how we managed to scale. So what we did was we worked with event planners. We sent the iPads over to them, and then they would actually go ahead and just use them for their events to make their events much better. So this is what our website evolved into. We actually started using it. We started to rebrand a little bit. We had a lot of marketing assets done that were very wedding centric. So you can see all the photos and everything look very wedding centric. We hired people to make nice photos. But in the end, we decided to just go ahead and pivot to events. And this was fine. So it was a nice side business for our company, of course, until 2020 when the pandemic hit and never quite recovered. But that's okay. Guest Day is just one of those things that we just kind of keep around. It's a technology that we still have some clients coming to us, existing customers, and we just service these existing customers. We're trying to figure out what's next for it. So that's what's going on. So I've spent some time on all these case studies, so I thought I would just quickly summarize. And these are all different types of apps and products and even different business models. Teacher's Pet is a B2C business model. It's something that we thought we could sell directly to teachers. IC Photo, well, it's free, but it's advertising, right? It's advertising. It never quite got to the point where it could sustain an entire business on its own. And Guest Day started out as a B2C, which means a business selling to consumers. But when it really took off was when it was a B2B product, business to business, us working with wedding planners. And some of the lessons that we took away from this were that it's important to prototype before you create. It's very important to make sure that what you're putting out there is what you agree on internally as a team. But it's also very important to find product market fit, which I don't think that we had for Teacher's Pet. Product market fit means that your product and the market are looking for each other. Okay? It's like if you go out there and you are trying to find someone and they're not trying to find you, it's going to be very difficult. Okay? It's also really important to iterate on your product, just like what we did for Guest Day. For Guest Day, we had a chance to, when the iPad came along, we realized, well, you know what? This is something that's really going to benefit our product. Let's go ahead and develop a different version of it for the iPad. And it worked out really well because, iPads can be carried around anywhere. You can register guests anywhere in a building, even they're entering an event. And of course, you need to pivot when you realize that your business is, when your startup and your product is not quite in the right market, it's time to pivot. Okay. So that's my first segment, which is all about a few case studies I just thought I would share. At this point, does anyone have any questions? I just like to pause right here just to see if anyone has any questions. Let's take a look. Okay, my Zoom app is not behaving. So there's one question here that says, how did you start planning? And how do we start planning? Well, we started planning by just kind of discussing to make sure what we knew what we wanted to do. And I'll be talking a little bit more about this later on when we talk about the prototyping stage. Okay, I'll share with you a little app journal that you can consider using for planning as well. And I'll go through bits of that. Okay, so we'll go through that. Here's another question. When did you know that your idea was a great idea? We never knew whether our ideas were great ideas. The only times that we knew our ideas worked was when we saw them being used, right? So like for IC Photo, when I see, parents telling their kids to stand up against the wall and holding their phones a certain way so they could take a photo and they could actually use the app, that's when I knew it worked, right? Because, it wasn't a friend, it was someone out there using my app. And that was a really nice feeling. Similarly for Guest Day, one of the nicest bits of feedback that we got was when we were just training some of these receptionists at an event. And one of the receptionists was just telling her friend, she was like, oh yeah, this is super easy to use. No problem, right? You just need to tap on this, swipe here. It's super easy to use. And that was really gratifying, right? Just being able to create a product that really spoke to people. So I think to answer your question, when did you know that your idea was a great idea? Well, we only really knew when it was out there. And it wasn't always a great idea the moment it went out. Okay. So a question over here is the ROI, right? I see a question about ROI, return on investment. Okay. I would say that Guest Day has paid for itself for sure over the years, because we started off as a 3-person company, just 3 co-founders. We hired a few people. We still have a sales guy who does it part-time. So he services our existing customers. it doesn't actually require a lot of servicing. We update our app, we just keep our customers happy. We update our iPads, we buy some new iPads. And I guess one thing I haven't mentioned is what the company does nowadays. The company mostly does education for technology. So we mostly do programming training, we teach coding, we teach app development. So we can definitely use the iPads if we buy them. So I would say that, it's definitely a positive ROI. I don't think I've quantified it to date based on, how much we spent on manpower and development time and everything. But Guest Day was definitely net positive, even though customers, even though the business fell off a cliff when the pandemic came around. Because when the pandemic came, no more events, right? Nobody needed the product anymore. But luckily, our business had moved on to doing other things by the time. Okay. All right, so yeah, updating. So here's a comment. Updating give people that you care more about the service, right? So just keeping it up to date, right? Let people know that you are still working on it, I think. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next bit, which is a bit about ideation. All right. So we get this question a lot, and we get this question from a different audience than now. Okay, so I don't actually know over here where people are from and what age groups you're in and things like that. Maybe I should have made a poll for that. I would have loved to find out about that, but that's okay. All right, so most of my audience, when I tell them about design thinking, about app development, these are high school students. All right, high school students, they have a fairly limited set of resources. They have a fairly limited view of the world. They haven't had much or any work experience. So for us, our challenge for them is to help them come up with an interesting app idea that they can actually build. So I'd like to take a moment to share some of what I do with them, and let's see whether it's something that's relevant to all of you as well. Okay. First of all, right, I like to start off with what not to make. Okay, what not to make, because there are quite a few that we tell them. All right. So first of all, we tell them not to make apps that won't pass Apple's App Store review or Google's Play Store rules. We tell them, you might want to avoid apps that are too large or complex. We tell them to avoid apps that are overdone. We tell them to avoid apps where, if you look at it, you can say, this could have been a website. Let me elaborate on these. So apps that won't pass review, right? This is something that I think is relevant to all of you as well. All right. Just be aware that before Apple and Google that you publish any app on their stores, they review every app against a set of guidelines to ensure quality and safety. Okay, because these are the two major mobile platforms out there. They cannot afford to let some app in that causes a huge publicity nightmare or just huge security issues for their users. So they review every app. This has caused trouble to some people. Some people actually get their apps rejected for the wrong reasons, but those are a bit more rare, and usually you can work it out with the reviewers. But these are some reasons for rejection. Infringement of intellectual property. I think that makes sense, right? If you wanted to go out there and make an app about Mickey Mouse, well, I don't think they will let it through because they know that you are not the Walt Disney Company. If you are from the Walt Disney Company and you're here, I guess that's fine. There is a possibility that you make something that lacks functionality. Okay, so one of the apps that I get my students to make is a name card app where they just put their picture, they put their name, and ta-da, you have your very first app. That is not going to make it onto the App Store. All right, very simple. That's not going to make it to the App Store. Anything with inappropriate content, right? I think everyone can agree on what some of these are. Things that are offensive, insensitive, upsetting, right? Might be country specific. Okay. Anything with misleading or false information, and others, for example, in 2020, when we were running our class, we had a student who wanted to put up an app that let them track where they went within the school. And the reason he gave for that was that, we wanted to just kind of be able to avoid COVID hotspots within the school. This was rejected because at the time, Apple and Google just refused to let any app through that was COVID related. They only allowed any such apps from government app developers. Okay, because they just didn't want a panic about, just someone putting misinformation out there and causing panic and public health threats. So these are just some of the possible reasons that apps don't pass review. So it's good to know what restrictions you're working within. Next up, this one might or might not apply to you. Okay, as working professionals, you might be able to pull these off, but I think it's also good to impose constraints on yourself. So if you have big ideas, you probably also have limited time. So what we tell our students is we tell them to create small, meaningful apps that they can innovate in. Okay, so difficult apps will be things that require multiple users to be useful. A social network. It's very, very difficult to make a social network nowadays. So you might have heard of Twitter. When Twitter was bought over and there are some changes in policies, a lot of people left for other social networks. Many of those have since failed. So it's very, very difficult, even when you have the opportunity to build something which requires many, many users. Okay, and you can imagine a social network is not very useful if just 1 or 2 people download, because what are they going to do? I'm going to post something and this person is going to see it and they'll post back to me. We might as well have been using a messaging app. The second bit, I wouldn't want to discourage you, okay? But for my students, especially the high schoolers, I tell them, you know what? Have something that requires a backend server, something that requires login or streaming or just a lot of data storage, anything that requires the cloud will be very challenging. So I'd like to ask them to keep all these restrictions in mind and see how they can innovate without having to do these things. Okay. E-commerce or payments is, of course, very difficult. And that might be the case for you as well, because I understand that you only have a limited amount of time to finish this program. So if you are able to prove that you can implement these, that's good. But you might want to consider how you can do without some of these features. Okay. Things that are highly data intensive. This one is really tricky because there's a lot of data out there. And I'll show you some of the apps that the students have made afterwards. Sometimes the data is readily available and you can use it. For example, mapping data. There's a lot of mapping data out there, but you can grab it from the internet. You don't need a list of, for example, restaurants around you in Dubai. You can probably grab it from Google Maps. However, there are certain things that are harder to do, and I'll show you one afterwards. And the last one is trying to be a super app. So you've probably heard of WeChat from China. That's a super app. It does everything, right? It's how a lot of Chinese people actually do their payments, they do their lessons, they do their chats, they book transport, all within one app. That's very difficult to do, and it's something that you might want to reconsider because it will just look as though you have a lack of focus. Okay. All right. So once again, beginners have made complex apps, right? Some have worked with complex APIs. APIs are application programming interfaces, right? Different ways of doing things without having to dive into the details. So you can use machine learning models, or you can get decent sized data sets and just work with them. But just be prepared to spend time on things other than app development. Okay, so just be very careful. Like you have to figure out where to get your data, how to clean your data, reformat data to a format that you can use in your app. Okay, it's not easy. All right. This one over here, okay, I just like to spend a moment on it. We call it overdone apps. You've probably heard of the term overdone when it comes to, I guess, cooking eggs. Okay, when eggs are overdone, they become very rubbery. All right, there are lots of apps out there that have been done a lot. And our students love to tell us that they want to make a new to-do list. They want to make a new note-taking app. They want to make a new recipe app. Okay, what we'd love for them to do, and for you as well, is to think more broadly. Try not to replicate things that are already built into the system. Right? Android and iOS both have to-do lists. They both have note-taking. They don't have recipe apps, but I guess there's something that's already out there. Okay, so I guess these are just things that you can do. So you can make good use of the mentors available in this program, and you can reframe your ideas towards different audiences. Okay, so a to-do list for entrepreneurs trying to do fundraising. Well, that's really specific, and that's going to be something that maybe the entrepreneurs your target audience can really appreciate. And this last one is one of those things where we realize this after the app's been done. There are apps that just provide information, how to save the environment, information about my upcoming event. I think this is probably something that the students are more likely to do, right? Because they are interested in a topic and they just want to present the data, at which point we download the app and we're like, are you sure someone will really download this app just for this information? Okay, so we call this could have been a website. So after all those counterexamples, let's look at some sharp and focused commercial and student apps. And once again, I want to just caveat that these apps are very small, right? They are purposefully chosen to be very small. And I'm sure some of you have very big ambitions, and that is something that the organization is encouraging you to come in with. Okay, but I want to show you that you can make very interesting apps that are very small as well. So let me show you a few. These are Apple Design Award winners. Okay, so every year Apple comes up with these winners of best design apps. So let me just show you real quick. This is a habit app. So let me just run this video. Okay, so this thing over here, it's from quite a while back. It really is just an app that lets you track your habits. Okay, it's something where you can just see your statistics over time. I use this. I really quite enjoy it. I use it to remind myself to drink 8 glasses of water every day or something like that. And it will, you can break a habit or you can develop a new habit. Okay, so it's just really nicely designed. It's got fun little animations. Okay, and these are the things that really appeal to users. You could do this as a really boring app where it's just a few lines where it just says, floss your teeth, be positive, and you tap on it, and there's a number next to it that increases. But if you do it in a really interesting way, right, that's how you get the attention of your users. And in this case, that's how you get the attention of Apple, and they could give you an award. Okay, so that's one. This next one over here, I like this because it's from my home country, Singapore. So this is a simple currency conversion app. Okay, and it's a very simple concept. It's got a list of numbers on the left-hand side. It's got a list of numbers on the right-hand side. And if you want to see numbers that are bigger or in between, you just tap and swipe. It's such a simple concept. And it's really, really effective, right? So I don't think they show you this over here. Oh, there you go. You tap on it, it'll show you the numbers in between. That's all. It's a very, very, very simple app. It's something that you can just imagine someone using when they're traveling. I use this all the time. So my last trip was to Dubai, and I use it all the time. Okay, and this last one over here, this one's pretty interesting. It's called Not Boring Habits. This one is a bunch of, again, another habit app, but it's really heavily animated and just really visually appealing. Okay, so if you're interested in any of these, I encourage you to download them. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. Just take a look and or you can just search for Apple Design Award winners. I think Google has their own awards, but I spend most of my time looking at these Apple Design Award winners. Okay, so I'm not going to show you this video, but let me just move on. Let me just show you some of the student apps that we've made over the years. Okay, and this one over here, oops, all right, I shouldn't click on it, sorry. All right, so this is an actual, a simple little study app, right? So its core functionalities are simple. It's got a timer, it's got a to-do list, right? But it's very nicely drawn. All right, this one is another thing that the students have made to solve their own problems, because when they're studying, teachers will write things on the whiteboards and they want to take pictures of it. So, okay, so they take a picture, it reformats it nicely, gets the contrast well, and then they can categorize it and save it. Okay, we call this a CRUD app. A CRUD app is something that lets the users create, read, update, and delete data, but it's got a nice value proposition and it's got a very clear purpose. Okay, this one over here is an example of a very data-intensive app. It's called Halal SG. So in Singapore, not all restaurants are halal, but we do have a sizable Muslim population. And this is an Indonesian student in Singapore. So he said, well, it's kind of difficult for me to find halal food. So he actually went and created this app. So for this, he spent most of his time not on developing the app, but actually getting the data, fixing it up, right, putting it into a meaningful format that could be imported into the app, and then actually making sure that the data was accurate. And over here, this is a learning app. I don't think I mentioned the different types of apps you can create. I tell my students not to make games, but gamified experiences are something that could be very interesting to do more of, right? So this is an app for learning the Chinese language. Okay, and this one I'll skip past. This is just let me just skip past this. So yeah. So I guess this is just something that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, right? Letting you think about what you can make. Okay. For you, right, I understand that you have bigger goals, and I've heard I've talked to some of the teams that have booked the sessions, and I've heard of some of the ideas, and they're fantastic. And I guess my advice for that would be take what you want to build and figure out how you can get the idea across really well. Because for a hackathon such as this, right, for a competition such as this, you're unlikely to be submitting an entire product. Okay, so which one of these things is the core functionality, and which one of these things are something that really represents your product really well? Spend your time and focus on that. And where, for those of you who don't know what to make, right, here are some things that we suggest. These are everyday problems that people face. Okay, the students usually draw their inspiration from family, from school, and from work. Sometimes they draw it from shared experiences, or maybe a local context. So the Halal SG is one, right? It's something that he just couldn't find in Singapore, so he built it. And sometimes the idea is to recontextualize existing apps, like a currency converter. A currency converter is out there. You can go to a website and just type in, into Google, but you could make it a lot more delightful to use by figuring out how best to present the data. Okay, and that brings us to the end of my second segment. We have 3, so I'd just like to pause here and take a look if you have any questions. All right, let me just take a moment to take a look at the questions real quick. All right, so if you have any questions, please let us know. Feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll try and answer them every time we get a break. And we have a chance for Q&A at the end as well. All right, so it's an idea. Okay, I have a new question here. I'm going to push it to the webinar. Is an idea fulfilling a current need the best, or an idea making a new need for community also good? Okay, so this is really tricky, right? So the question is, should my idea fulfill a current need, or maybe should it help address something that's not really solved right now? I think that's really up to you. Right, we're going to spend a little bit of time on this in the next section about figuring out what's important to you, and maybe from there we can try and see what makes sense for you. Okay, but if it's something that you really care about, right, my tip is that if it's something that you really care about, and you will be motivated to solve the problem, and that's very important, because you're going to run into a situation where, oh my goodness, like everything's stacked against me, this doesn't work, I'm getting bad feedback. But if it's something important to you, that will really help a lot. Okay. The question is there any methodology? So a little bit, right? How do you start building your app and design and prototyping? I'll talk about that in the next segment. Okay. All right. This one says to follow. So I'm not sure if that's a complete question. So I'm just going to, if you have a full question, let me know, right? And this one, please suggest a mobile app design application. Okay, this one's a little bit tricky. There are a lot, and I'm not sure if there's any, but I think you should log into the Housebase and take a look at some of the materials that are in there. So, for example, I usually build for iOS, Apple platforms, so I use Xcode, but there are many ways to do it. I'll talk more about what we can use for app design in a moment as well. Okay, so it looks like a lot of questions are going to be answered afterwards. Let me just check real quick if there's anything else in the chat. All right, so Vivian has a question. Wow, all right. Okay, so I think it's been answered. All right, okay, so it's about eligibility for the program. Okay, cool. So let's continue. In this last segment, we're now in the final bits of your design thinking, which is about prototyping and testing. Okay, so once you figured out what you want to make, you should go and make a prototype. Okay, you probably shouldn't get started with your app by just, immediately jumping in and coding. All right, so this is Xcode, like I mentioned. This is what we use to build iOS apps. Okay, you probably shouldn't just launch your IDE and start coding. Maybe some of you use Visual Studio Code, maybe some of you use Android Studio, or all kinds of different options out there. Okay, I generally don't think it's a good idea to immediately start coding. Some of you might draw up your user interface designs, right? And this is an example of a design app. There are many out there. You've probably heard of things like Photoshop, Illustrator, Figma, and all kinds of others. Some people might want to plan everything out, right? Just start listing things out. And I think that's a good idea, right? I think it's a good idea to figure out what you want to do next, okay? But we suggest that you just take a piece of paper and a pen and just start scribbling your ideas down. The important thing is that you have things that you aren't afraid to throw away, okay? The idea here is that we want you to prototype before you code, okay? And that's how this entire program is structured, right? We're not asking you to do any coding until you reach the second phase of the program. So we're just asking you to spend some time building a prototype. And this is what actual app developers in the world do as well. They make a prototype before they get started on the actual app. And the lower fidelity the prototype, the better. What does lower fidelity mean? Well, here's one way to think about it. If you draw it out and someone comes by and they crush up your paper and throw it away, would you be really upset? Okay? If you would be really, really upset, then it might not be low fidelity enough. It has to be something that you don't mind throwing away because you didn't spend a lot of time and effort on it. Okay, so that's the general idea, right? Let me talk a little bit more about prototyping. So why prototype? Well, first of all, it helps you figure out what you're making. Many of you are working in teams. You have to come to agreement on what you're actually making. So you might have an idea of what this app is, but your co-founder might have a different idea, right? It's always good to resolve all these before you actually start investing in time to code your product. Okay, you need to figure out how it behaves. Is it such that when you open the screen, what does the user see? For example, if you're doing an e-wallet app, I was talking to an app creator just now. So an e-wallet, what's the most important thing to a user? Well, maybe the most important thing could be to pay for things, right? Because you're standing in line, you reach the counter, they tell you it's $5, all right, and you need to quickly open up your app, tap in $5 and pay the merchant. Okay, how does the user do that? All right, and the best way to figure this out is to just draw it out, right? Prototype something. How will it look? Where does the button go? Is it green? Is it blue? Like, how do things look? Right? These are all great things to figure out early on. Or you can draw different options. You might have heard of this term called A/B testing. So it's A/B testing. And that's when tech companies, when they're not sure about which design works, they'll send out different versions of a design to different users, and they'll use that to gather feedback. This only works if you have a lot of users and you have ways to analyze their behaviors. But early on, you can just draw different versions and show it to people, right? That's one way to figure out what works best for you. Okay, so you can make a version and you can go and get some feedback. And this is all very important in the entire process of design thinking. All right, so we just want to avoid situations like this where, 2 months down the road, your co-founder comes to you and says, "No, I thought you wanted to do it this way." And they say, "No, that's not what I said." Right? If you come to an agreement early on, right, then everyone has, this prototype. Like if you recall the different screenshots and photos that I took earlier, we agreed on those and we built things based on those. Okay, so it's still okay to change your mind, but you better have a good reason for it. All right, so once again, why prototype? Prototyping helps us understand some questions like, what are we making? How will it look? How will it behave? And it lets you create multiple iterations of potential app designs. Then you can quickly try different ways to find something that works. And finally, it ensures everyone on the team is on the same page before moving forward. Here's a quote that I love from John Maeda from IDEO. Right? IDEO is, of course, one of the world's most preeminent design firms. They designed the mouse, the very mouse that you use on your computer. Okay, and he says that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 meanings. Okay, so instead of trying to just talk to one another about it, maybe you should just draw it out. Okay, so I don't know if any of you have ever had this situation where you're trying to describe your idea to someone. Maybe you should just draw it out and let them take a look. All right. So I keep talking about prototypes. What is a prototype? Well, prototypes can just be, as you see on the screen, different drawings that you have. Okay, just take a marker, take a big piece of paper, everyone just stand around and draw on there, draw some arrows. It doesn't have to look good, right? The point is not for it to look good. The point is for it to let the users understand how it works. Okay, you can use post-it notes. Okay, you can use all kinds of different things and just sketch it out real quick. Some people like to do it in high fidelity designs. So after you make a sketch version, before you start implementing, you might want to actually make a version that's has more things like color and maybe some behavior, okay? But I also want to show you that there are prototypes that might not even be pen and paper. So this is IDEO again, the design firm. And way back in the early days of the iPhone, they were asked to make something called Elmo Monster Maker. So maybe you've heard of Sesame Street, right? So the American series where all kinds of cool monsters and they're very educational. And so the app was to make a monster that would dance on screen. So Elmo, for example, would dance on screen and you would tap on it and you would do different things. So let's take a look at that prototype.
It's possible dance moves for Monster Maker. So music starts. And I'm a player, so I come in and I eat the monster.
So you tap on the monster, right? And it changes the dance move.
It does super well. And it can go for as long as I want.
Okay. So yeah, very simple, right? A video can be a great prototype. So video can be a great prototype, and you don't even need to code this, right? If you notice what's going on here. So that's actually a big cardboard cutout. So instead of doing any coding, what they did was they had a big cardboard cutout of an iPhone and they just filmed him. And that really got the idea across. You know how the app works just by looking at that video. Okay, so that's one example of a prototype. Here's another one. Right, this is a low fidelity prototype using paper. So let's take a look.
Your task now is to open the My EE app.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to mute the sound. All right, but essentially what this is it's something that you just design beforehand and you have certain tasks that you want the user to do. And this is a great way to figure out if there's any difficulty that the user faces when they are trying to do a certain task. So over here, he's saying, okay, you need to open the app, you need to log in, you need to enter your password. And when you're doing something like this, at some point, the user might be like, wait, they might pause, right? They might not say anything, but you might say, oh, could you, place the add 10-pound top-up file to your home screen? And then they might look around and be very confused just for a couple of seconds. And that's when you know that there's something that you can improve in your design. This is a prototype. This is absolutely a prototype as well. And it takes a lot of effort to get something like this done, but it takes a lot less effort to make this than to actually do code. Okay, so just be aware, many, many different types of prototypes out there. Okay, and then you know what? I'm sure there are some of you, or you might know someone like this, people who actually think in code. Okay, so I have a student, right? He's now my colleague. He actually thinks in code. For him, he actually prototypes faster by coding than by actually drawing things out. So for him, an app is a prototype. Okay, and that's perfectly fine. He actually just, opens up his editor and just types things out and sees, oh, okay, this works. Oh, it doesn't work. Let's go change it. Let's delete everything and start again. That's okay. That's also a prototype. A prototyping tool is only as effective as how fast you can use it. All right, once again, a prototyping tool is only as effective as how fast you can use it. For most of us, that's pen and paper. That's the fastest tool that we have. But if you are a Photoshop expert, if you're Illustrator expert, if you are an Xcode or Android Studio expert, maybe that works better for you. That is okay. All right. So I'm not going to go through this video, but if you have a chance, you can look up this thing called 60-second prototyping from Apple. This is where an Apple engineer went on stage and showed how he would make a simple prototype of a toothbrushing app in 60 seconds using presentation software. So he uses Keynote, which is the Apple equivalent of PowerPoint, to make a prototype. and it's fascinating. I won't show you the entire video, but if you have time, please look it up. I think these slides will be available for you after the webinar as well. So how do we do prototyping? Okay, how do we do prototyping? There are many ways, and we're trying to help you out a little bit, right? And we've created an app design journal for you to go through the prototyping process. Okay, so this journal, and I can paste the link into the chat afterwards. It's something that we've kind of like distilled down from various sources. And if you're interested, right, please feel free to try it out, right? So the link right here is bit.ly/createapps_journal. You can't tell that there's an underscore over here because of the underline, right? But it's right there. When you click on it, let me just show you. It will ask you to make a copy of the document. Okay, it'll ask you to make a copy of the document. It's a Google Docs document. Let me show you the document, and I'll just quickly run through it. Maybe you'll find it handy, maybe you won't, but I think there's something in here for everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to switch over here just to show you this. Okay, and the idea is that these are just some things that we get our students to think about. I like Google Docs because I can do things like collapsing and opening up the menu at the side and things like that. So if you prefer using Microsoft Word or anything of the sort, you can just download the document after you create it. Right, just go to File and download your own copy. Okay, but let me just show you real quick. So these are just some things that we tell our students to think about, right? When you're starting to work, think of a project management platform. So it could be Notion, it could be Trello. These are all different ways to just keep track of things to do and what's important and who's been assigned to them. You probably also want a way to figure out how to share and save documents, right? You could use Google, Dropbox, Microsoft, okay? And we also want people to think about what success is in the project. And it's something important to come back and look at this. Now, from here, we actually have a way for you to think about how you want to come up with your project, okay? And not everyone likes this method, but I think it's worth exploring. It's called challenge-based learning. It's actually a form of teaching and education. And it's something that you start from a big idea and you kind of like research and figure things out until you have a problem that you want to solve. So for example, what we ask them to do is to come to an agreement of a big idea. Big ideas are one-word topics that can be explored in multiple ways. You might have heard of things like the UN Sustainable Goals, right? The UN Sustainable Goals, things like poverty, things like water for everyone, right? So it might not be one word, it might be a phrase, okay? But it could be music, for example, right? So this is something that the entire team has to come to an agreement on. Right, so everyone will fill something in and they'll decide, okay, we want to do music, for example. All right. And from here, we come up with essential questions. What are some questions that are important to know about the big idea and refine and contextualize that idea? So for example, for music, all right. So for example, this group might be thinking, what skills are important to musicians? Or how do I make people appreciate certain types of music more? Or why do certain types of music appeal more to people in one region than another, right? So these are all questions that you can ask, and these are all very personal. But from here, you kind of figure out what's important to everyone. So for example, here's the example. How can we help beginners in music develop relative pitch? And from here, you just kind of come up with a challenge statement, right? Rephrase it to something that you can help solve, all right? So this is it's a very broad way of doing things, but feel free to make multiple copies of it. But this is something that really helps our students by just getting them to think from a big topic all the way down to an actual problem. And afterwards, we still ask them to continue investigating, right? Because we want them to think about questions, all right? So different questions and findings, go online, ask ChatGPT or something, right? Figure out all kinds of different questions that will help you understand it better. Figure out what resources are available out there, for example, lessons and videos and websites and databases and people, and list them all here. And this part is important for everyone. Look on the App Store or just websites or things like that and find any pre-existing solutions that address your challenge, whether partially or completely. Okay, so you can see over here, this app works by testing knowledge through quizzes. It's paid and its language is Japanese, so it's not really useful for us. Finally, we put this all together and you could come up with a presentation, right? Show this to someone and see whether they can help you out with it. Okay. And finally, this is where you actually come up with the solution. So notice that we don't actually ask our students to come up with their solutions all the way till they have really spent a lot of time exploring the concepts. Okay. And so, for example, here are some mobile app ideas. A mobile app that provides progressive practice and tips on how to obtain relative pitch. Okay. And this is a nice way to summarize it as a problem statement. My app will help a certain audience with a problem they face by doing something. So my app will help musicians who want to learn relative pitch with developing relative pitch by using a mobile app that provides progressive practice for them to train. And from here, another thing to think about is user stories. This is all about empathy, which is a very important component of design thinking. Okay, so you kind of need to think, okay, right? So look through the eyes of the user and says, okay, as a musician, I want tools that help me develop relative pitch. As a user, I might want something that helps me do certain things. And these are things that you need to come back and look at when you are building your app so that you know that you are addressing the problems that you have mentioned. Okay. These are for prototyping. You can use any visual design tool. And finally, for user testing, the key thing is kind of like what you saw in the paper prototyping video just now. You need to list down the things you want your users to be able to do. Just show them your prototype, ask them to be able to do these things. And if they cannot, you have to figure out why. Okay. So this is just a very simple little project journal. So if you're interested in using it, by all means, right, please go ahead and use this version of it in your own projects. But if you have others that you want to use, by all means, right, there are many different things that you can do. I want to spend a moment to talk a little bit about types of prototypes. Okay, so there's a low fidelity prototype, one that you don't mind just throwing away. Okay, and these will focus on user flow, not aesthetics, not color, and not fonts. Okay, whereas a high fidelity prototype, let me show you more low fidelity prototypes. Okay, things that matter: how does the user do X? How does the user get from screen A to screen B? Things that don't matter: what color should we use? Should this font be bold? Right? These are not things that you should worry about right now. So this is another example of a low fidelity prototype. A high fidelity prototype is something that could pass off as the actual app. And you might do this in all kinds of different prototyping tools. Okay, so this one on screen was done with Keynote, the presentation app. So you can do it in PowerPoint. Right? You can see over here that there's some animations. And when the user taps somewhere on the screen, for example, right, it will actually go to a new slide. Okay, so it looks as though it's an actual app. And this is really useful for you to come to agreement on things like color schemes, icon choices, and many more. And you can actually let the user try things out, right? So that you can get your proper testing done. Okay, so we've come to the end of the session, right? I have some time for questions and answers, but let me just do a quick summary, all right? So what we went through was, different parts of the design thinking process. The case studies are to help you try to figure out who your target audience is, find product market fit. And then you need to go through your ideation process, figure out what you actually want to make. I suggest that you find something that's important to you, something that's relevant to you, something that solves a real problem. And I guess it has to be made into a meaningful app. And for prototyping, why do it? How to do it? There are lots of ways to do prototyping. I've given you one resource if you're interested in using it. If you'd like to find out more about how to use it, if you have questions about it, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to just pause right here. We are nearing the end of our segment. Thank you so much for staying with us through this entire hour and a half. So if there are any questions, I'd love to take them now. Let me just go check in my webinar button over here. Oh, could I share the document link, please? Absolutely. Right. Let me just go share the document link into the chat. Okay, so I've shared the document link into the chat. Right. So thank you. Let me just also share it into the answer. Is there a draft software that replicates the paper system? Right. That's the next question that I'm getting over here. Not really. So the people who make the paper prototypes, right, they really just use scissors and glue, and they just marker. It helps that if you're all in the same room and you're just like kind of having fun, just post-its, right? The easiest way to do is probably using post-its, and post-its are easy to attach, easy to remove, easy to draw on. So that's how I would do that. Hopefully I'm answering your question. If not, please feel free to rephrase and I'll be happy to answer again. Okay. All right. If you have any other questions, please let us know, or you can let us know in the chat. I'll be happy to answer them. Let's stick around for a few more minutes. So the question here, can I book a session to discuss about the idea? Yes. Okay. We have a whole panel of ideation mentors available in the program. I'm somewhere in there. I believe my calendar is bookable as well. Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in talking to any of us, please let us know. You can book a time. I think it should be somewhere on the portal. I don't know what it looks like for you, but I'm pretty sure it's doable because I have talked to someone already. So yes, definitely it's doable. Okay, there's a request for my email address. Sure, I'll be happy to send that. Let me put that on screen. All right, so it's yjsoon@tk.sg. That's hopefully easy to type out. My name is YJ, and yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Although, I guess give me some time. I guess I'm on a different time zone and everything. So I'm just curious, where's everyone from? Like, if you could let me know in the chat where you're from. Are there people? Which I guess if you're from the UAE, where in the UAE you're from? I'm just curious. I've only ever been to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, so I'm just curious. Oh, Colombia. Wow. All right. Colombia, Nigeria, Dubai. Very nice. Okay. Very cool. So I'm just curious to find out where everyone is from. Okay. Very nice. All right. Abu Dhabi, Nigeria, India. Awesome. Lots and lots of people from all over, right? Egypt. Okay, so I guess I'm just reading it up because I know that not everyone can see, right? So, okay. So someone asked, am I open to partnerships? I guess just email me. I'm happy to take any of this offline. But I guess focus on the competition, right? I'm just yeah, there's a lot to be done inside here. Right. So yeah, I'm just curious to see where everyone's from Syria, Bahrain. Awesome, amazing. Right. I haven't been to many of these places, so would love to visit someday. South Africa, very nice. All right. Any other questions? I guess I'll just do one final call for questions. And if nothing comes to mind right now, right, you are free to drop me an email. Happy to try and get back to you. If you do want to tell me more about your idea, you want to get feedback, I guess send as much detail as you're comfortable sending, so that I can help you out better. Yeah. And of course, I want to take this chance to reiterate that everyone should head over to this website right here, which is www.createapps.ae. This is the UAE's flagship contest for mobile app development. So please, as our hosts have been telling us, right, this is your chance to dive into the exciting world of mobile app development, compete for prizes, and showcase your creativity, and of course, contribute to Dubai's economic success. All right. So this is open to everyone: students, tech enthusiasts, entrepreneurs. All right. App development superstars. I would love to hear, from folks who have a coding experience. And I'm always interested in finding out what people use for their tech stacks and things like that. And yeah, there's an online course available on the portal to actually get you started on app development.
Until next time, happy learning.